everyone else?
Good.
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. So today the agenda is just Q&A. So it can be listing related Q&A. If you have other questions that you want answers to, you want to know what forms to use, what to do in a situation, you want to gain more clarity on how to use a system or process, like feel free to ask. It's open forum.
Don't y'all speak at once now.
Right? Anybody? Going once, going twice.
Let me see what I have. On a vacant piece of land,
Yes.
what would you suggest for the required documents?
Yeah, so are you talking about when the listing agreement goes out? Are you talking about once you're under contract? Are you writing an offer on it? What side of the vacant land deal would you like to know?
Let's say we're on the seller side.
Okay.
And the buyer submitted an offer, but it's contingent on their property being sold. So how long do they have if they didn't specify? So if we get another offer that's a backup, then we can give them a notice to perform?
So it all depends. So with the offer that said it was contingent on the sale of the buyer's property, there should also have been a COP form or a contingency for sale of buyer's property form. Was there a COP form included in with the offer?
Yes.
All right. So hold on just a second because I'm going to pull up that form so that other people can see it.
This was my question too on contingencies.
Oh, good. All right. So if we pull up the COP form, it's the only one that's, just so you know, the COP form is one of the few forms that you're like, where'd they come up with that acronym? It's contingency of property, but the form is called contingency for sale of buyer's property. So it's, if you don't remember the acronym, sometimes it's hard to find this form in the Zip Forms library. So just kind of mental note on that. And then on your COP form, Anastasia, did they submit a COP form with their offer?
Yes, ma'am, they did.
Oh, good. All right. So on the contingency for sale of the buyer's property, you would use this form anytime the purchase of a property is contingent on the buyer selling another piece of property. It may mean that for qualification purposes, they can't qualify with both properties. It may be that they need the funds from one sale in order to be able to have the down payment for the sale moving forward. Or it could just be that they're just not comfortable carrying two payments at once and they want it to be contingent on the sale of another property. The first section of the, hold on, my phone is still trying to snooze me and set off an alarm and I don't know why. Stop it. All right. The first section just talks about whether it's contingent. So it defaults to the sale and close of escrow. For some people, they may just need a contingency that it's in contract. They may just want to know that, okay, my property is moving forward and it's going to close. So I'm not going to have two payments, but it doesn't actually need to close. So it defaults to the sale and close of escrow. You could change it, or the buyer could have changed it to entering into contract, or just the close of sale. If it's already in contract, it may be the close of that property. And then there's some time frames in there. The second section gives them how many days it's going to take them, how many days we're going to give them to get into contract on the property before we can cancel this agreement potentially. That's before they're in default. So if they're not in contract, the default 17 days. Then on day 18, they would be in default of this agreement. You could service them a notice to perform to cancel this based on that time frame in section 2. Okay, and people can change it. And then section 3 is the listing and MLS status of buyer's property. So whether it's already listed in with another agent or with a agent, or whether it will be within a certain number of days, signed listing agreement with another agent. And then it just goes through all the details of it being listed in section 3. Section 4 is the close of escrow of the buyer's property, that it's going to close escrow that the buyer has. So this is for the close of escrow part of this contingency. So if they leave it defaulted up here on section 1, they have 2 contingencies. They have the contingency to enter into contract, and they have the contingency for the sale of the property. The contingency for entering into contract is specified there in section 2. We talked about that. The contingency for the sale of the buyer's property is in section 4, which is it defaults to the buyer has until the following time to close escrow on the sale of buyer's property. Either the scheduled close of escrow of the seller's property, so they close on the same day, or no later than blank days prior to the scheduled close of escrow. So they that is not the default. The default is that they have up until the close of escrow to close escrow on their property. And a lot of times in a busy market, well, in a balanced market more so, you'll see that you're trying to domino them so that the buyer's property is closing on the same day that the property they're buying, or the seller's property. And all the parties have to be out of their houses at the same time on the same day. And it's really scary. And if you can't negotiate a buyer rent back on or seller rent back on the properties, then that's where it kind of gets funky. But that is, they have up until the close of escrow. Okay. Section 4 is there's that stop. All right. Sorry. All right. Thought I got turned off, but apparently not. The section 5 is the status of the sale. This just says that within 2 days okay, so the buyer agrees to keep seller informed on the status of the transaction, including any updates, modifications, addendums, amendments to the terms of the accepted offer. So they're required to give you a copy of the accepted offer once it's in contract. And if there's any changes to that, then they should let you know. Within 2 days after seller's written request, but no earlier than applicable time to remove contingencies in the contract for sale of buyer's property, buyer shall deliver to seller evidence of the removal of those identified contingencies. So here, right, within 2 days after the seller's written request, right, but no earlier than the time to remove the contingencies in the contract for the sale. So we've got a copy of the buyer's contract, and we're making sure that their buyers are staying on track by removing contingencies. So that's what section 5B is outlining, that we have the ability to request and make sure that those buyers have been removing contingencies. Okay, and you could do a written request for that. Section 6 is the cancellation of buyer's property. If their buyer cancels, it defaults to 2 days after cancellation. They're supposed to deliver notice to us. I usually update this on mine to 1 day so that people know that, hey, the second we get something canceled, you're going to be notified of that. But that's section 6. Section 7 is the really important section. Well, it's all kind of really important, but section 7 is really where Anastasia's question lied, was number 7, which is the backup offers and the seller's right to require buyer to remove contingencies or cancel. So up until this point, the only way the buyer could cancel or the seller could cancel on this contingency for the buyer's property is if they didn't enter into escrow in the time specified up there in section 2, or if by the time specified in section 4, the escrow didn't close, which oftentimes defaults to the same date of the close of escrow. Other than that, down here in section 7, this outlines that the seller can continue to market the property and collect backup offers. Now, you can't market the property on the MLS as active. It has to go to contingent show, and you can let people know in the private comments that you're accepting backup offers. Okay, and you can even, like, if somebody called you and asked you questions, you can be like, yeah, absolutely, we've got an accepted contract, but it's contingent on the sale of the buyer's property. I'd absolutely take a backup offer, and we can service a notice to perform to this buyer on such and such date. Okay, and we'll go over that here in a second. The removal of buyer contingencies and proof of funds. So this is going to come back into play here in a second, but section 7B outlines that if seller accepts a written backup offer and provides buyer a copy of the signed accepted backup offer within the time specified in 7C1 or 2, seller shall have the right to give written notice to buyer in writing to remove this contingency, remove the loan contingency, if any, and provide verification of sufficient funds to close escrow without the sale of the buyer's property. Seller may use the bottom of page 2 of this form to comply with the written notice requirement of this paragraph. If buyer fails to complete these actions within 2 days after delivery of such notices, seller may then immediately cancel the agreement in writing. So we're going to go into the timeframes here in section C, but if we have the ability based on the time in section C 1, 2, or 3 will really be C 1 or 2, and we get a backup offer, the seller can present the buyer with the notice to perform down here on the bottom section is the notice to perform to the buyer. And they would have to, whether their property's in contract or not, they would have to remove their loan contingency. They would need to remove the contingency for the sale of their property. And they would need to, let's see, remove the loan contingency, provide verification of funds to close escrow. So they have to prove that they don't need to sell that property in order to close escrow on this property, that the loan isn't contingent on it, that their funds aren't contingent on it, and that they can remove that contingency in order to stay in contract. Otherwise, the seller can cancel and move forward with the other buyer. The time frames for being able to do that are outlined in section C, the time to give notice to remove those contingencies. So it defaults to immediate right to notify buyer. That means anytime we get a backup offer in writing, we can serve the buyer a notice to perform where they have to remove again that contingency for sale of buyer's property, the loan contingency, and show proof of funds to close escrow available to them. Or we can cancel the offer within those 2 days and then move forward with the other offer. So that's number 1 is the immediate right to notify buyer. That means we can do it at any time. Section 2 or number 2, C2 is delayed right to notify buyer. This would be like, hey, we're asking for 14 days to get into contract on our property, and we would like you to give us those 14 days without being able to cancel on us. So we're going to match this to how many days we think it's going to take to enter into escrow on this property. And you can't cancel on us until that time frame comes. So that means that during the first 14 days, it defaults to 17. The seller couldn't serve a notice to perform and cancel this based on just accepting a backup offer, whether it's better or not. Okay. The third option here is that there's no right to notify buyer. The seller shall not have the right to invoke the provisions at any time. So we can't cancel and ask them to show proof. If I'm working for my buyers and they're contingent on the sale of their property, oftentimes I come in here and check C3. That offers the best protection to my buyers when purchasing a property because the seller can't just turn around and issue a notice to perform. Most of the time, I'm not going to put a contingency in place if I'm not fairly confident that we're going to be able to get their property sold. And when accepting an offer on your property on a listing that is contingent on the sale of a property, it's usually under one of 2 circumstances. Either the offer is so amazing and fantastic, we would be stupid not to do it, and we're 100% sure that they're going to be able to get their property sold, or it might be a slower market, or at least a slower property type that may have been sitting on the market longer. It's better to put it in the contract, even with a contingency for the sale of the buyer's property, than it is to just let it sit. Okay. Sometimes, like if it's a really hot market, I think I'm going to get multiple offers and there's a buyer offering on a property and it's not even, their property's not even on the market yet. I'm going to be hard pressed to accept that offer. Unless maybe I've got the immediate right to notify buyer to remove those contingencies. Anastasia, did that answer your question about when you could get a backup offer and serve that notice to perform?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. To finish this form out, we are going to be going over this form again in detail in sometime in the summer months. It's on the calendar that hasn't been issued yet. I'm finalizing that up today. Removal of contingencies. This contingency can only be removed in writing, right? Even if, right? So it has to be removed in writing. The seller's right to cancel. Here's the section that outlines the seller's right to cancel. First, they have to issue a notice to perform to remove buyer contingencies, provide proof of funds. If buyer fails to take any actions in paragraph specified in paragraph 7B. After first giving buyer a notice to perform, buyer fails to enter into contract of the sale of buyer's property within the time specified in 2A. Keep in mind too, that like if the time in 2A was 14 days, you could issue the notice to perform 2 days prior to that due date. So if you were really trying to cancel and get away from this buyer because you got a better offer, any of these timeframes, you could issue that notice to perform 2 days prior to that notice so that it expires on the date where that item is due.
I have one question.
Yes.
So once the seller signs the accepted offer, time starts that day or the next day?
The day of the acceptance is always day 0. So 1 is the next day.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Let's see here. We've got after first giving buyer notice to perform to enter into contract, after first giving buyer notice to perform and doesn't close escrow on the property that's for sale, after first giving buyer notice to perform and they fail to deliver escrow evidence within the time specified in 1C and 2B. So remember, not only do they have to enter into escrow and tell you, but they have to deliver proof of the evidence of escrow. So that's something you can issue the notice to perform on. After first giving buyer a notice to perform and buyer fails to deliver evidence of the listing of buyer's property, right? It said that it was going to be listed within a certain number of days. And if it's not, you could issue that notice to perform. The submission of the buyer's property listing to the MLS within the time specified in 3C is the conclusion of that one. Buyer fails to deliver evidence of removal of contingencies on the sale of buyer's property and specified in paragraph 5B, right? So that's on the property they're selling that buyer's removing their contingencies. If the buyer gives notice to seller of either party's cancellation of contract for the buyer's property. Okay, so if anybody cancels on their purchase, then the seller can issue that, then the seller can cancel. The buyer's right to cancel, the buyer may cancel the agreement in writing. Prior to the removal of the buyer's contingency as specified in 1A, B, or C, buyers unable to enter into contract within the time specified. Either party for the buyer's property gives notice to the other to cancel the contract for purchase, and the buyer is unable to close escrow on the buyer's property within the time specified in paragraph 4. So those are the 3 ways that a buyer can cancel. The section 11 is also very important because this outlines when everything starts. Okay, this contingency always starts like Anastasia said. If we sign the acceptance today, today is day 0, tomorrow's day 1 as far as the time frames of this contingency. Now, as far as the time frames for everything else in the contract, that hinges on 11A, everything except the deposit. So the close of escrow, if they wrote a 30-day close of escrow on there, if they wrote a 14-day inspection contingency, if they're getting it appraised, if they have a loan contingency, all of those contingencies default to shall begin as specified in the agreement. So they also start immediately. Now, if you check this box right here on 11A, now none of the time frames in the contract except for the deposit start on the day after buyer delivers proof that their property is in escrow. So if I have 14 days to enter into escrow on my property and on day 10 we enter into escrow and I provide proof that we're in escrow, then day 10 of this contingency becomes day 0 of the contract. And then all of your close of escrow timeframes, your contingency timeframes that are in the residential purchase agreement, everything except this contingency start on that day. Okay, the only one that's separate from that is the deposit. The deposit is 11B, and that one specifies that, hey, the deposit's going to be delivered as specified in the agreement, which is generally 3 business days. Most people leave it at that, so we want their deposit and escrow right away. And then if we check this box here on 11B, then it would be within 3 business days after buyer delivers to seller evidence of escrow evidence of buyer's property, buyer's election in writing signed by the buyer to begin the time frame, or buyer's removal of the buyer's property contingency. So this is how the time frames are figured out in the contract down here in section 11. Buyer and seller sign agreeing to it. And if this is submitted with an offer and you're the listing agent, just keep in mind you can counter on any of these items as well as part of your counter offer. And then if we were going to serve a notice to perform to the buyer, we would do it here on this bottom section of the contract, which is, this is for the removal of, this is for that we've gotten a backup offer and we want the buyer to remove this contingency. And this, again, remember, they have to remove this contingency, they have to remove the loan contingency, and they have to show proof of funds within the 48-hour notice. Any other questions on this contingency for the sale of the buyer's property? There's a lot jam-packed into this little form of options, and I promise as you use it more, you'll become more familiar with it.
So in my instance, it's for a piece of land and they literally didn't mark any boxes. You just put, 3 is just his agency.
Okay.
And they put the buyer's property and that's it.
All right. So that means that it's contingent on the buyer entering into contract and the close of escrow on the buyer's property. So both entering in and close of escrow. It defaults so they have 17 days after acceptance to enter into contract to sell their property. And it says that they've signed a listing agreement because you said they put their brokerage information here in 3, but didn't check the box. So that means they've already signed the listing agreement. It's going to be the close of escrow is going to default to, up to the close of escrow of the subject property, which would be the vacant lot. They're going to keep you informed, and then that you can at any time immediately notify the buyer if you get a written backup offer, and they'll have 2 days to remove all the contingencies, or you can cancel and move forward with the other offer. It also is defaulting all the times in the contract start immediately, and that their deposit is also due.
Copy, thank you.
Yep. So that's what happens if you don't check any boxes. That's where all the options default to. What other questions do you all have? It can be lead gen related. It can be forms related. It can be processes related. It can be anything. How to run a CMA. Oh, you know what? Adriana's on this call, so she has a question. She just doesn't know she has a question.
I do. Sorry, I was going to ask you, and then my family's interrupting me.
How rude. Were you going to ask me about the home light?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. So for all of my transactions, and I talked about this previously, but I'll show you the nuts and bolts of it. I use HomeLight Listing Management and create a file, especially for my listings. So as you log into Barry's, under here under the productivity tools, there is this HLM, disclosures. That's HomeLight Listing Management. It used to be DIO, disclosures.
Okay.
Disclosure information. I don't know, DIO. I don't know what it was. Disclosure something. Anyways, now it's HomeLight Listing Management disclosures. If you click on that, you get free access to it. You do have to create an account. So there's where you are. If it's a listing, so you've got buyers and listings. So again, I create all my files, both buyers and sellers, under listings. However, if you clicked on somebody's link that was in the MLS, like Adriana's going to have a listing and she's going to put a link to her HomeLight Listing Management file in the MLS. If somebody clicked on that, it would show up under their buyer transactions. Okay, so that's how you toggle between the two. You don't have as much freedom on a buyer transaction as you do on a listing. On a listing, if you were creating a new package, you would just come up here and hit Create Property Package. Do you rep- Did you have a question? Okay. You would put whether you represent the seller or the buyer. Now, keep in mind that if I represent the buyer on a transaction, I create one of these as well, but I say I represent the seller. Okay. I want it to be a seller file because I have way more freedoms with the seller file. So I'm always going to say I represent the seller, and then I'm going to find my little checkbox, but you guys are covering it up with your wonderful faces. All right, there we go. We're going to hit next. Here's where you can put in the street address. It should auto-populate once you have that address in there. You just hit next. Here's where you can put in the details, like what are you asking for the property? How many bedrooms does it have? How many bathrooms? Sometimes I think it auto-populates, but I don't really remember. I'm just making this up just for the record. All right, and then you can put the description. I don't worry so much about the description. Here's where you can select agents. And again, if you have like a mentor, you may decide that you want to invite your mentor to the file so they can see your file as well. That's not a bad idea on here. So you have the ability to be able to do that. But you can add multiple listing agents. You would want to make sure that your license number is updated. You can change your profile image if you want to. As you can see, most of my stuff's not updated. I'm not super, oh, it's going to make me do it. How dare it? Oh, I probably shouldn't do that. I'll get red flagged if I put a real phone number in there. All right, let's try again. Here's where you can put in the escrow if you have a preferred escrow company. I usually just hit next. If you have a picture of the property, you can upload, you know, like a picture of the front of the house from your computer or your Dropbox or your Google Drive, or you can just skip that and hit create package. No, I don't want you to order the NHD report, so I just X out of there. And then here's the package. Now, anytime you create a package, it's always going to give you a cover sheet. And anytime you add something to this package, it's going to add that item to the cover sheet. It's kind of like a table of contents. It also gives somebody the ability to print the cover sheet and then sign off on those items. Okay, so like if a buyer was making an offer on my property and I had multiple offers, I may require that the buyer sign the cover sheet stating that they've received a copy of everything and that they've had a chance to review it as part of the offer. To share this package, you just come up here to this share button and hit share package. Here's where you could share it with a buyer's agent. You could share it with a team member. You could share it with a buyer. So I would share it. I don't know why it takes away my ability to share it with the seller, but I might say, hey, I've got a buyer. My buyer's name is seller. And my seller's email is seller1@gmail.com, right? So you can share it with your sellers that way as a buyer. Totally okay to do that. I usually do. So it usually, as a team member, you can add your transaction coordinator to the file as well. So keep that in mind. And then you can invite buyer's agents or buyers. So if somebody called you and they're like, oh man, can I get a copy of that report that you said you had available? You can go in and be like, hey, buyer's agent, and share it with the buyer's agent. Okay. The other option that you just hit share package, you can add a custom message if you want to before you hit share package. That'll send them an email with a link to be able to access the package. The other option is you hit get share link, and then it'll populate a link for you that you can copy. This is what you would put into the MLS under the confidential remarks of please review all disclosures and reports in HomeLight Listing Management, and then put the link there. I usually move this little toggle button up here to users with this link can immediately view documents. Okay, I want to be as hands-off on as possible. And if I use this button here, where it's users with link require your approval to view documents, then if Anastasia wants to see my disclosure package, she copies the link out of the MLS, she puts it into her browser, she fills in her information. Now she doesn't have access to that until I see that she's made a request and now I've given her permission to be able to view it. That's way too much work for me. I don't like work. I like to have fun, and I don't want to be interrupted every 10 minutes by somebody requesting a disclosure package. So I go up here to users with this link can immediately view documents. They have to put in their name, they have to put in their email address, and then they can have access to the package. They can also share it with their buyers. You do not get the names and contact information of the buyers when somebody shares it with a buyer. It just allows them to be able to share it directly with the buyers so that they could see the property information as well. Any questions about how to share the package?
So when
Yep.
when you put an offer in and you get an email from the listing agent that says, hey, we've noticed that 500 people have requested packages, but only 2 have put an offer in. Where do they get those stats from?
Yeah, so it depends where that email is coming from, but if it's coming from Disclosures.io, it means that, hey, this many people have clicked on the link to view the disclosures. And if you're receiving offers through Disclosure.io, that's where they're collecting, or sorry, Homelight Listing Management, that's where they're collecting their offers. Information is based on how many offers you've received. If it's pulling it and you're getting that email from somewhere else, it's just a scam and they're trying to sucker you into getting a membership to whatever the services that they're offering so that you can share that information with your sellers. And they're probably pulling it from multiple locations. But you can, as a listing agent, you can ask that your offers be submitted through here, which I often do. It's quite nice when the offers are submitted, you get a little notification and it keeps them all nice and neat and orderly. I like this personally because I work with a partner agent, and this gives us the ability that we could both log in and look at all the offers received on a property. So if I were out of town and she was doing the offer review, we didn't have to worry about them going to my email. So it makes it kind of simple that way. So you can do it where you ask them to submit the offers through here. That is free to be able to do it. You can also add in an offer. You can go to your settings, setup link. Oh, look at, you can set up, let's see. No, I lied. It's only San Francisco, so you can't set that up. You can mute your notifications. You can allow buyer agents access to submit their offer, right? If you didn't want to get offers on here, you may want to turn this off so that they don't accidentally submit an offer through here. You can archive the package or you can delete the package. Those are your options. If we're in documents, then you can add documents here. So you can upload documents. So as I get seller disclosures in, as I get reports or inspections in, I'm going to upload those from my computer and put them in here. Your completed file is going to look.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry for being a pest.
You can ask as many questions as you would like, Anastasia.
On vacant land, do you require an HD report?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yep, because the NHD report is actually not associated with the real property itself. As far as the home on the property, it's associated with the land. The NHD is a land report. So it's telling you whether that's in an area of naturally occurring asbestos, whether there's a neighborhood noise nuisance, like airport, industrial zones, earthquake hazards, fire hazards. It's absolutely required on vacant land properties. So
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yep. So here's what a completed file would look like for me. I'm going to have all of your disclosures in here that my sellers signed with the listing agent. As we get more information, like as we get the preliminary title report, we're going to add the CC&Rs. If you're like, Amy, I've never seen CC&Rs in my life. In your preliminary title report, it's going to be hyperlinked in there for those CC&Rs. So if we look at the prelim, it's usually once you get through kind of the gibberish pages. Let's see, that's gonna this hyperlink here is the plot map, usually. And then as we scroll down, it's got taxes. Here is, oh, here's that probably that plot map again. We're going to keep scrolling down. We're looking for hyperlinks. Here is terms and provisions. Official records. Oh, this is something different. Development agreement between the City of Dixon and Brookfield Dixon LLC. So this had to do with the development of that land, modified instruments, modified again. So all these hyperlinks, you can access whatever was recorded. The agreement for relocation, reconstruction, and protection of facilities with developer. So we're not really super concerned about this. Here's the reciprocal easement. So if you want a copy of the easement report, you can access it there. Eventually we'll get to, here's another easement report, and then it was modified. Easements. Here's the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So here's that CC&Rs. I like to click on that hyperlink, which will open up another page with the CC&Rs, and then I like to download this and upload it to my file. The other thing that you'll see, so I'm going to go back now. So that's where you get your CC&Rs, is off your preliminary title report. Most of those easements you don't have to pull up separately, but the CC&Rs are kind of important. It's got my full NHD report. Here's my full prelim. This property had solar, so we included a copy of their true-up bill so that people could see how much power that the solar was producing and what they were paying on their PG&E. So I got the copy of the true-up bill and a copy of their PG&E bill pay history for the last 24 months. I think it goes back 24 months so that people can see. I got that wildfire disaster advisory. There's a PG&E form that Realty One Group has. We have our seller property questionnaire, our transfer disclosure statement, and our NHD signature page. So that's the one that everybody signs. And then as reports and inspections are done, we upload that as well. The home inspection, HVAC inspection, and the AVID report, or the agent visual inspection report. So I'm just going to upload it to this file. The nice thing about that is, let's say that this buyer falls out of contract, and then we have to put it back on the market. I've now got all the reports in here ready to go for the next buyer. Now, as I mentioned, there's a cover sheet. If we look at that cover sheet, it's going to list everything. I didn't upload a photo of the house, or it would have been right there. So it just shows the geographical location on a map. It gives the agent's information. Here's the preferred escrow that got filled out because my TC does this. I don't do it. Submit offers via Homelight Listing Management. Here's the instructions. And then it's got the list of all of the documents and how many pages they were that are in this file. And it's got a signature page for the buyers and their agents. Magical. So I like that. So that's what the file is going to look like when you start adding documents to it. I don't include a copy of the listing agreement because it's nobody's business except between me and the seller themselves. So this is all public reports and inspections. If I go over to viewers, it'll show me who has put in their name and email to receive a copy of this package, or who has access to it. Okay. You can't actually view activity. If you hit view activity, you have to use the pro account, but you can see who's been in here. Again, you're not going to see their buyer's information either. Here's the activity that you can't see unless you upload the pro. You can't send the messages back and forth unless you upgrade to pro. As you can see, I do not upgrade to pro. Here's where the offers would be. There's 6, but they're not showing up because the property's been archived and closed. Otherwise, you would see those offers show up in here and you'd be able to see those offers. So that's how I use Homelight Listing Management. Adriana, does that answer your questions as far as how to create a package and how to upload things to it and what you might want to put in there?
Yeah. How soon do I need to do that?
I like to have it done by the time we go on the market, and it usually gets created about the same time. Like a listing agreement gets signed, I usually go in there and create this file, because I'm going to go ahead and throw all those disclosures in that were signed with the listing agreement.
Okay.
And again, I
Thank you.
don't actually do it. My TC does it. So, but if I were doing it, that's when I would do it. As far as a buyer goes, I would create the file once we get into contract on the property.
So if I have a PC, or I'm not a PC,
A TC.
a TC, should I expect she's going to do it, or am I doing it?
You should have a
Or
conversation
do I need
with
to
your
ask her?
Yeah, have a conversation with the TC about that to see if this is something they do or not. I use a private transaction coordinator outside of Realty One Group, which is why my TC does it. And again, Melina might do it. I just don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, I'll ask her.
Okay, so home light listing management. So we talked about the contingency for the sale of the buyer's property. Anastasia, to answer your question, as far as vacant land goes, everything that you would normally do with a listing agreement or a purchase still applies to vacant land, except for, instead of the transfer disclosure statement, is it the, no, it's a seller property questionnaire, I think, gets replaced with a vacant land property questionnaire. So it's a different questionnaire. I think Glide has both of them in there if you're going to send out those through Glide, if you haven't yet already. You're not going to do an agent visual inspection disclosure on a vacant land, but basically everything else apply. Oh, and okay, that's not true. Here we go. Your Solano County disclosure, if it's in Solano County, still applies. If it's in that one's in Solano County. So your Solano County is still going to apply. If it's in Napa or someplace like that, for those that may have vacant lots coming up in other locations, there is a Napa County disclosure. So you want to search and find that one and include it. The statewide buyer and celery still applies. So I think I just said celery. The statewide buyer and seller advisory still applies. The water conserving plumbing fixtures does not apply. The water heater smoke detector statement of compliance does not apply. You don't need either of those. You don't need the square footage advisory. You would still include the market conditions advisory. You would probably not get a buyer investigation elections, although you might from the buyer's agent. It's not required though. That comes directly from the buyer. There may be CC&Rs. So you always want to check the prelim to see if there's CC&Rs for the properties. Most properties that are in the city limits have CC&Rs on them. And in addition, if it's a vacant lot and it's in a homeowners association, those HOA rules and regulations still do apply, even though there's no house on the property. So you'd want to include the HOA documents as well as the CC&Rs. You're still going to have that NHD report because, again, that NHD is about natural hazards, not necessarily against a property itself that's standing on a property or on a lot. So you would still have your NHD report. You would still have a preliminary title report because that shows the chain of title. It shows any easements that people may have on the property or that they may have to cross into other properties and any liens and encumbrances currently on that lot. You're probably not going to have well, you could have a PG&E bill if it's a vacant lot, but usually not necessary to have PG&E if it doesn't have solar. The wildfire disaster advisory is still going to be included on that vacant lot in case they want to make sure they can check insurability of the potential of building on properties. I think your PG&E form from Realty One Group, Team One, is still going to be in there. Again, you're going to have a vacant land questionnaire instead of the seller property questionnaire, and then you're going to have the...
Can you back up to that Team One Fox PG&E
Yes.
form? I've never seen that. Is that something new?
No, it's been around for a while, but your TC probably sends it out.
Copy. Okay. What if we're
Yeah.
not using a TC for a minimal transaction?
Then just ask Melina for a copy of it. Or
Copy.
you can come steal it from here. Look. We'll just download it. I think I can add files to the chat.
Amy, so are
File.
we in charge of looking for the county disclosures?
If you have a transaction coordinator, your transaction coordinator will usually find it for you and put it in there.
Okay.
If anybody doesn't have a transaction coordinator or you just want to see what that PG&E form is, there's a blank unsigned one in the chat box. All right, back to the question of, what was your question, Adriana? I'm sorry.
Oh, you just answered my question.
The county disclosure, the county disclosures. So yeah, we used to have, let me see. Oh, I wonder if, hold on. I'm just going to look at something to see if, I don't know if Realty One uses it or not because I haven't accessed it. But inside of SkySlope, if not, I'll see if we can upload them in here. There's a working documents section. So let's see if there's anything in here. Oh, it's empty. I'll see if maybe Melina wants to utilize this Office Docs folder. That's a good place to put those documents, like a blank copy of the commission demand and a blank copy of the PG&E statement and the county disclosures. But so I'll see if she wants to do that and then see if I can get her to utilize it. It's a nice place to put them, or if they're hiding someplace else, and I'll let you know if they are hiding someplace else. But if you look up like Napa County real estate disclosure and just Google that, it usually will come up someplace. So like we've got the Napa County DDA. And you may want to look at a couple to make sure it's like the most recent copy. And this one doesn't have a date on it. Although this says 2010. So that's probably the most recent one because I think the last one expired at some point earlier than that. So you just, sometimes I like scroll down and pull up a copy of them. Nope. To see if I can find it. And then sometimes you'll find it like in the MLS forms as well. But that's usually the easiest way. And sometimes you may want to search like city and county. That's an ugly one. So, and you can always ask too, you can always ask Melina, our in-house transaction coordinator, because she's the one that's in charge of the compliance as well. So you can always reach out to her when you have a new listing and just be like, hey, Melina, I know you're not TCing this file or whatever, you know, it's only in contract for 36,000. There really wasn't any money for a TC, but do you know, is there a Napa County disclosure, or can you send me over a copy of the Napa County disclosure, or you know, it's in Antioch. What locally required disclosures are we going to have? And they usually have a copy or a record of them, or at least knowledge. What other questions? So I got a random, since nobody's asking questions, I'll just ramble on for 10 minutes. I'll give you guys breaks in case you think of a question. But yesterday I was contacted randomly by a lady who is selling her mobile home and decided to do a for sale by owner. She has a buyer for the mobile home that she decided to, they drew up a little like one-page purchase agreement. And she contacted me asking me and saying, hey, I've decided I don't want to sell my mobile home. Don't ask me how she got my information. I have no idea. I didn't even ask her for her details, but she's like, I don't want to sell this anymore. Like, we just entered in the contract on this and I've decided I don't want to sell. And I'm like, she's like, can I cancel it? And I was like, well, you know, normally there's provisions in a contract that allow you to cancel, but you can't just randomly cancel the contract. So I asked her if she wanted to send me over a copy of whatever it was that they signed. And this is why they should not be for sale by owners. It was a very vague purchase contract, just stating that the property is being sold to, in the amount of X number of dollars, a legal description of the property. And that was basically it. And they both signed it, agreeing to it. And I go, well, based on your contract, no, like, you didn't leave yourselves any outs, no contingencies. I said that the buyers, because it was a mobile home in a mobile home park, I said, is the buyers already applied to get approved by the mobile home park? Because, you know, my course of action was going to be, well, if you know the manager, just ask the manager to deny their approval. Then that would have cut it and, you know, ended the transaction. But no, they already applied and they already got approval. I think they had a loan on the property, but that was moving along, and there was no loan contingency in the contract, nor was there an appraisal contingency or an inspection contingency. So neither party really could cancel this contract. However, I remembered way back, deep down inside, in the days when I had to take my real estate exam. And I remembered, for a contract to be valid, that there has to be a deposit, or it's called something else. I actually thought of the name yesterday. I didn't think deposit, but there wasn't a deposit in the consideration for a real estate contract to be valid. It has to be in writing and there has to be consideration. So basically that good faith deposit, right? Without a good faith deposit, the contract is invalid. And there was no provision in their handwritten contract for a deposit. So in effect, the contract was invalid because there was no deposit. Woohoo! So anyways, I shared that with her. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're always like, oftentimes it comes up with our VA buyers when we go to write the contract. They're like, well, it's 100% financing. Why do I have to do a deposit? Well, number one, the deposit is what makes it valid. Number two, it's what confirms with the seller that the buyer is serious about moving forward. No, you don't have to put any money down for some of our loans like the USDA and the VA, but there's still closing costs associated. You're still going to come out of pocket with some money. And maybe they're getting closing costs covered because they really have no money. They still have to put a deposit. It might be like $500. It might be $1,000. If they don't default on their contract, which it's pretty easy to not default on a contract. I don't know that I've lost anybody's deposit in the however many years I've been doing real estate at this point. I don't think I've lost anybody's deposit. So it's really hard to lose that deposit. It's not like in other states where the contingencies automatically remove on a specific day. In California, you have to remove them in writing. So you still have those contingencies in place until you're ready to remove them or until the seller threatens to cancel on you, whichever comes first. So it's really hard to lose that deposit. That deposit's going to go towards the buyer's down payment. If they don't have any down payment, that deposit will go towards their closing costs. If they've negotiated a credit with the seller or they've increased their rate to 22% on their home purchase so that they don't have any closing costs, then that money would be refunded back to them at the close of escrow. So the buyer can't get extra money out of a purchase except for the money they've put in. So you can always get your deposit back. You generally can't get more than your deposit back after the close of escrow in the amount of credits and stuff. So just kind of keep that in mind. We can't write a contract and ask for the seller to do a $20,000 closing cost credit when our closing costs only come to $10,000 and then expect that the buyer's going to get that additional $10,000 back in a check at the end. It doesn't work that way. That additional $10,000 that the buyer didn't use in their closing costs, it's going back to the seller. Now, back in the day, when we first started, you used to be able to do that. You could negotiate large credits and actually get money back at the close of escrow. It could count towards your closing costs and your down payment. Like your max credit could be 6%. Your closing costs only ran usually between 2 and 3%. So you could actually get money to count towards your deposit or your down payment or whatever. So anyways, all that to be said, to make sure that you have a deposit as part of your contract. And all that stuff that you had to learn for your real estate exam that's useless for the most part in your everyday business, it does come into play every once in a while. Nice and handy. I hope that was beneficial to somebody. Any other questions? We've got 6 minutes. 6 minutes. I can answer another question.
I have a question about that one when we were talking about like getting the listing and going to the listing appointment. You know how you showed us that like Google Doc of like that booklet that you can make or that you can print out?
Yeah.
Can you share that with us? And then please. And then also, is there a place in the one login where you can find like scripts?
Yes. So if you
Okay.
go to your one zone, we're going to wait very patiently with my hands away from the keyboard so I don't click on things unnecessarily. And you wait for it to load all the way completely. All right. Inside one zone, if you go to marketing, here's where you find those listing presentations. So see marketing on the left-hand side and then listing presentations. That's where you can download those listing presentations that you can then edit and make it your own. You have to update it with like your information. That's what you were asking for as far as packets, correct, Brittany?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So that's where you find those. And then if you're looking for scripts, you want to go to the One University. 1U is what that one is, 1U.
Okay.
And then inside of here, again, we're going to wait patiently without clicking 20 times on the screen for it to load. I'm working on my patience when it comes to computers. All right, welcome to 1U. There's learning and all sorts of dashboards and libraries. So if we search like listing presentation, I have to spell it right. Script. Let's see what comes up. There we go. Look at that. Script book selection on the listing process, script books, objections at the listing appointment, scripts and script practices. So anytime there's anything that you need as far as script wise, you can just come in here and plug it in there. Look at, there's a just listed, just sold, have buyer neighborhood calls. So there's scripts on that. There's just a general script book, script for door knocking, the listing process, expired listings, all sorts of good things in here that you can access.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Look at, we could probably go like open house. Oops, open house. Look at script and approach at an open house on steroids, increasing conversions from open houses. So many, how to conduct a powerful and profitable open house. You guys should be spending time in here searching this 1U. You'll find all sorts of cool things in here that you may pick up like a tidbit or something that you can put into practice. I am not the end all on knowledge when it comes to real estate. There's lots of ways to do things differently. And so you might find some really good stuff in here.
Yeah, that's a lot of information.
Right. You can just search.
Yeah.
Endless opportunities.
Okay, I have one more.
Yes.
If you have somebody that wants a specific area,
Yes.
and you're doing up their drip,
Okay.
how do you narrow down the what do you call it, the area and district? Where do you find those?
Are you
So
doing their drip in berries? Are you doing their drip
Yes.
in one suite? In berries. Okay.
in berries?
So if you're doing it in berries and they want a specific area, I highly recommend doing it as a map search. So if I went into contacts, by the way, just so everybody knows, a few weeks ago while I'm waiting for this to open, I just set up a search for one suite and saw that they now have the ability to send text message updates of new properties that match the search criteria. And I clicked the button on, which I need to turn it off, but I get really cool notifications all day long on new properties that hit the market that match my criteria that I set up in that search. So the one suite does have the ability to text now, which is kind of fun. So, but to get back to Anastasia's question, let's say I've already created the person. If I come down here to searches and hit add a search, this is where you would change the search to map search. And then you would put like your desired area and then hit submit. Now it's going to pull up that map search. And I find that this is the best way because when you start looking at like districts and areas, it's only as accurate as the information that's put in by agents, and agents are human, and some of them aren't very good agents, and some of them are spectacular agents. But sometimes their information's not very, very accurate in there. They might be like, I don't want to take the time to figure out what area it's in, so they just pick an area. Where here, it's like if I wanted like the Cheyenne neighborhood, I could go draw, select, you know, and hand pick that Cheyenne neighborhood, and now it's only going to pull listings for them inside of that area. Again, you can change the criteria as well with bedrooms, bathrooms, living area, price points. So whatever their max price is, you can set that up just like you would a regular search. And maybe they're like, well, I would take Cheyenne. You can do multiple areas. So maybe they're like, I would take that area off of the end of Alamo Drive, you know, maybe north of Foothill. And maybe over here, this is kind of like Wyckoff. These are like fancy buyers. So maybe they would take that area. And maybe they like the Stonegate neighborhoods. Excuse me. You can put multiple areas in here. We're going to Take out that Stonegate neighborhood. And you just want to remember that when you get to the end, you would just want to make sure you zoom out so you can see all the areas that you've selected. And maybe they're like, well, I want that North Alamo, but I don't want that one section of North Alamo. This is what else you can do. You can come in here and hit draw. And you can be like, they want this, but they don't want these little streets right here because those aren't as nice. So I could like come in here and select that. And then I can go in here to edit. And that last polygon, I can say exclude. And now it's going to pull listings inside this polygon, but not this one. So if they're like, man, yeah, I want to look at homes, but I really don't like that Poplar, Cedar, Citrus Avenue area of the downtown. We're not interested in those homes. You could like take that out just by blocking it in and then excluding it. So that's how I would set up the search if they were looking for a specific area. If you were like just really wanted to go off those maps, then if you go to Barry's to the home page and you go somewhere, hold on, I will find it. CCPA, home path, rules and regulations. It's, let's see, listing input and change, maybe. Barry's forms. I don't think it's in there, but let's look there first. Let's see. Listing exclusion. No, that's not it. Member resources. Somewhere there's a map. Area maps. So under Barry's resources, was that over here too? No. So you go into your home page and then you go Barry's forms, which is going to pop up a new screen. And then under member resources, you can go to area maps. And here's where you can pull up, like if I went to Northern Solano, and then we're going to wait for it to load. Here are the area maps for Northern Solano. And if you click on it, it'll tell you this is Vacaville 3. And then if I wanted the one that is over there, that green one, that's Vacaville 4. Or the one that contains Larry's Produce is Green Valley 2. So those are the two ways, but I would do it as I would set it up as a search and then save that search wherever that went. And then you would just hit save. I think you have to hit save. No, cancel. You hit add listings. And then that's going to set it up. And then, so you have to hit, so if you set it up as a search, like I did, it's a really cool property. Look at that neat property. 2 houses on lots. Fancy. All right, sorry. And then you hit update. So once you hit search and then you hit update or add listings to cart. So you search it, you set up the search, you hit add listings to cart and then update. And then here it'll send out the current active ones and then it'll set that up as a standard search then on their profile. Anastasia, did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
All right, so there's your area map. So you have to go to Barry's forms. Really, you could probably anywhere in here would probably open up that next window, which gets you into member resources, which is where you would find that area maps, in case you wanted to know what the area maps are. Fabulous. Any other questions before we finish up for today? Those were we covered good topics. I appreciate your guys's participation in our Q&A session. In the chat box is going to be the ability to log your attendance. So make sure you take the time to log your attendance. And then also,
did you put that form in the chat box?
What?
Did you put that form in the chat box?
I did. I told you I put it in the form or in the chat box.
I don't see it.
You don't see it. All right, let's add it again. Hold on.
Am I blind? Does somebody else
You are.
see it?
It's a,
Oh.
let's go. Your computer. Here, I'll add it again. Then you can tell me if you see it or not. Boom. And send. Loading there. It says it's loaded. Oh, no, you know what? For some reason, mine are just going to Brittany. So only Brittany's getting it. She got it twice now. That's why you're not seeing it. It's
I was
me.
gonna
It's my
say, I was
error.
like, see it.
Brittany's like, I see it. I don't know what everybody's problems are.
Are you on the bottom where it says send to everyone, young lady?
I am now. I was on the bottom before. Somehow it just went to Brittany only. Now it went to everybody. Now you see it in there, Anastasia.
Got it.
Later this week, I know we're covering creating forms in Google. I think on Thursday at 4, we're creating. I'll show you how to create forms inside of Jot Forms and inside of Google Forms. And then on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, we're going to dive into the appraisal packet. I'll show you what the packet looks like and the information that I provide to the appraiser, and how I put that packet together for you. And then the next week, we are moving into our summer schedule. So since you guys are on, you guys are getting the news first. We're changing the times. Oh, yes, Abby, I'll update that here in a second. We're changing the times come next week for trainings. And I apologize if they don't work for you. We tried to get as much people's input as possible, and tried to make it work with my schedule, which is a little bit difficult sometimes. But Tuesdays, the training is going to be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So Tuesdays at 3, I believe. And then Wednesdays and Thursdays are going to be at 9 a.m. So we're going to hit you early. You got to get out of bed, hopefully before you head off to do your summer activities, we can catch you. And we've got a lot of really cool trainings. We've got Brick House Mortgage is going to be joining us once a month. We've got Placer Title is going to be bringing us some really good classes on like 1031 exchanges and mobile home transactions and all sorts of fun things. I think she's there once a month, but it might be twice a month. We'll hear from Placer Title. Once a week, we're going to be covering some of those car forms. So it's a little different format than we've been doing. We're not going over the Rev Up material in the summer. So we'll do forms trainings. And then I'm going to pull in some other stuff that was requested over the last couple of months on when you do the little attendance log and you request trainings. I'm pulling some of those in there and adding some good stuff. So I think we'll have some great content for the summer. I want you guys to stay plugged in and working hard. But we are changing up those times. They'll still be recorded and they'll still be on Zoom. So you'll be able to join us via Zoom Tuesdays at 3 or Wednesdays and Thursdays at 4. No, at 9 a.m. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. Wednesdays and Thursdays at 9 a.m. I can't say it right. It'll take me a while. Or you can watch the recording on Zoom. We'll try to get those posted as soon as possible. So that'll be not this week, but next week that'll go into play, and the schedule will come out later this week. Poor Abby, she's got a lot to do this week because I keep putting off issuing the official schedule. So I'm working on that. And then don't forget, today at 3 o'clock is we're going over, we've got Scott from the Omaha office in Nebraska. In case you're like, where is Omaha? It's in Nebraska. Scott's going to come and share how to make your real estate business function better using Chat GPT, which is that AI. You can plug stuff in, how to use the prompts and how to use it appropriately. So he's going to be teaching on that today at 3 o'clock. That'll be about an hour. So hopefully you guys can all join us. But thank you for your participation today. Anything else before we wrap up? Fabulous. I'll see you all today at 3 o'clock for the Chat GPT training, and then tomorrow for appraisals, Thursday for forms. Brittany,
Thank
do have
you.
comments? You're welcome.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Enjoy your day. See you later.